I'd like to give my fellow board members the opportunity to introduce themselves, beginning with the members who are here with me in Albany, followed by the board members who are in our Church Street location in New York City. And let's start with Commissioner Hope Knight.
Yes.
Oh, here. Sorry.
Hello, I'm Hope Knight, President and CEO of the Empire State Development.
Good afternoon. I'm Dan McGraw. I'm the Secretary Treasurer of the New York State Conference of Operating Engineers. I also sit on the New York State Building and Construction Trades Executive Board.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Tucker. I'm the President and CEO of Northern Workforce Training Center in Buffalo, New York.
Robert Mujica, Director of the Budget, New York State.
Christopher Lund, retired New York State DOL, happily retired.
Thank you. And in New York City?
Peter Flory, DNF Development, and also representing Long Island Builders Institute.
Okay, and Gary LaBarbera, President of the New York State and New York City Building and Construction Trades Councils.
Thank you. So the Public Subsidy Board is committed to transparency and is subject to the New York State open meeting law. Here to provide insight on the law is our first guest speaker, Deputy Commissioner of Worker Protection, Jeanette Lizelle.
Good
Jeanette.
afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you, Commissioner. The Public Subsidy Board is subject to the open meetings law. We want to share some key points for you all to be aware of as this board starts to meet regularly. The open meetings law is.
He can't hear you. Pull it closer. Sorry.
Just once you just come up closer.
Better? Okay. The open meetings law is based on the premise that the public has the right to attend meetings of public bodies, listen to debate, and watch the decision-making process. Public body means any entity that consists of two or more people and requires a quorum to conduct business, public business, or perform a governmental function. A meeting is defined as the official convening of a public body for public business. Even if the public body does not intend to take action, or if the meeting isn't called a meeting, for example, you call it a work session, the meeting has to be open to the public. The Public Subsidy Board meets the definition of a public body. A quorum of the board is required to conduct a board meeting and take official action. A majority of the entire board, meaning more than half, constitutes a quorum. A majority of the entire board, and not merely those present, is required for the board to take official action. Therefore, of a total of 13 members, 7 members amount to both a quorum and a majority. For the Public Subsidy Board to take any official actions, 7 members are required to create a quorum, and at least 7 members must agree for a motion or resolution to pass.
Does anybody have any questions to ask Jeanette? In New York? Nope. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jeanette. The Public Subsidy Board was created by New York Labor Law, Section 224-C. This board will have 13 members when fully seated. We do not currently have the full board with us today. Some members are still in various stages of the appointment process, but I look forward to meeting with them soon. This board's work is linked to New York Labor Law, Section 224-A. This law expanded the application of prevailing wage law from exclusively public construction projects to certain private construction projects for the first time in our state's history. Section 224-A covers construction projects with total costs exceeding $5 million, and where at least 30% of the total costs come from public funds or assistance, for example, tax credits. This board has been tasked with unique responsibilities, including the ability to examine and make recommendations regarding the following: the minimum threshold percentage of public funds and the dollar threshold of projects as set by law, certain construction work excluded as a covered project, the definition of construction for purposes of Section 224-A, and particular instances of benefits, monies, or credits as to whether or not they should constitute public funds. Before making any recommendations that apply broadly to all projects, we will hold a public hearing, which will be announced at least 15 days in advance. Additionally, this board is empowered to issue binding determinations to any public entity or any private or not-for-profit owner or developer as to any particular matter related to an existing or potential covered project. Now, as you can see, this body is tasked with some very important duties. For purposes of today's meeting, I would like us to ensure we all have working understanding of our ethical and transparency obligations. Members of this body will be required to complete some in-depth training on ethics, but here to provide us with an overview of ethics is Jerome Tracy, Associate Attorney and Ethics Officer at the New York State Department of Labor. Jerome.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon, everyone. Some of you I have met in over the years in various incarnations that I've had with the Department of Labor. As the Commissioner said, she's designated me as the agency ethics officer. So for today, I would just like to give you an overview of the types of issues that you need to be aware of because of the fact that even though you are not state employees, you are deemed under the ethics law to be covered under certain circumstances, and there are certain rules that you need to be aware of so you don't run afoul of anything. So the ethics law generally, overall, it wants to be sure that there aren't any real or apparent conflicts of interest between what you do in the private sector and what you do as a member of this board. And to ensure that there are certain rules and procedures that are set up. There is an entity that is responsible for enforcing the ethics law. And over the last 4 decades, that has changed from the New York State Ethics Commission to the Commission on Public Integrity to the Joint Commission on Public Ethics to what it is now, which is the Commission on Ethics and Lobbying in Government, CELG. No one has come up with a good acronym, so I'll just call it the Commission. The Commission was established on July 8th of this year, so it's very new, and it's made up of 11 members, the gubernatorial appointments, legislative leader appointments, attorney general, state controller, those types of things. So those 11 members, it was made a little different this time around because there is a vetting committee of law school deans, which reviews all of the people who are proposed to be members and can do thumbs up or thumbs down on them. If you've followed the papers, you've seen that a number of the committee members have been seated, but at least one was not as a result of this process. It was again established by the legislature and signed into law by the governor with the hope that people would recognize the fact that this is an attempt to be sure that the commission is something that is responsible, that can be relied upon, that can be looked upon by the public as protecting their rights and making sure that everybody behaves in a way that's appropriate as a public servant. So the commission is subject to the Freedom of Information Law and to the open meetings laws, just as you are, it is to a greater or lesser extent. It has jurisdiction over all state employees, which whatever that number is now, I don't know, 250 or 300,000, as well as all unpaid or per diem members of boards, volunteers such as yourselves who are willing to give of your time to assist the government in doing important work. So it interprets the law. It is responsible for issuing guidance. It issues formal advisory opinions, and those will have the force and effect of law unless they're overturned by court proceedings. It provides additional training beyond which is given by agency ethics officers. But really the primary responsibility for giving training is going to be me. And as I'll explain later, a number of other people within this agency who've now been trained to give the ethics training on a regular basis. And it's an enforcement agency. The commission enforces the ethics law. Ultimately, they have the ability to find that there are violations. They can do investigations, they can do hearings, and they can establish significant monetary penalties, which in addition to other types of remedies. So it's got a lot of power. It's a relatively small commission. Like I said, 11 members. It doesn't have a lot of staff, but it has people there who are available. If you want to look at their website, if you're ever interested in doing that, it's ethics.ny.gov. It has a lot of information there, which you can go through in more depth. Again, I'm just going to hit on some main points today. I don't want to take up too much of your time. And then there's me, the agency ethics officer. So I do a lot of what the ethics agency does on a basis just for Department of Labor related individuals. I will give you an opinion. If you have a question about whether or not something is appropriate, if it's legal, if it's permissible or not, I'm more than happy to talk to you about that. Discussions with me are not, by law, they are not confidential in the sense that I'm legally prohibited from discussing them. I have no desire to do that. If you want to bring a hypothetical situation to me rather than talk about something else, I'm more than happy to discuss that. So regardless of how you want to raise it, if you have a question, if you're ever not sure, if you think there might be something which could be a conflict, please contact me. And my contact information with the department is just my name, jerome.tracy@labor.ny.gov. And I'm more than happy to talk with you anytime that something might come up that you think you need to talk about. And then there's also training. As a result of the change this year, training changed considerably. It used to be that only people who were required to file the annual financial disclosure statement, which I'll talk about in a minute, had to also receive the training. And the training was on a rolling schedule of once and then every 3 years, et cetera. That's all gone. What happened was that the law changed and said that every New York State employee now has to receive the same comprehensive ethics training course. New employees within 90 days of becoming employed, existing employees within the next year or within a year from July 8th. We are, and other agencies are furiously struggling to make sure that we have in place a program to meet that statute and to do everything that we're supposed to be doing with regard to that training. And so what it is now is that it used to be mandated that it had to be 2 hours. It's not mandated that it has to be 2 hours. I think I can get through it in maybe 90 minutes, but it's substantially more than I can give you today. Like I said, I'm hitting the high points today. But once you do that, every other year, you're going to be required to take an online course, which doesn't even exist yet, but the commission is working on preparing that. So every 2 years, you're going to have to take live or virtual, interactive in some way course with regard to the ethics. And on the every off year, you have to take the seminar, which will be a recorded type virtual thing you can take and then get a check mark from the commission. That's the nature of training now. So I mentioned the financial disclosure statement. Because of the nature of what you do for the board, you're considered to be policymakers, as that term is described in the ethics law. And as a result of being policymakers, it's a requirement that you file every year an annual financial disclosure statement. Because you're policymakers, there's no exemption. Everybody who's designated a policymaker must file without exemption. Some of the people who have to file because of the salary that they make might be able to get an exemption. That's not you. So as a result of that, you need to understand what it is and why they have it. There are about 30,000 of them filed every year with the commission. Within this agency, it's around 300 or so have to file. Because you're designated policymakers, you have to file. In theory, once I get all of your names and they get put into the database with the commission, they used to have an automated email that would go out to you saying, now you have 30 days to file your annual financial disclosure statement. You may or may not get that. I'm going to check it and see exactly what's happening now because they are in the throes of redoing their system. If not, I will contact you and I'll give you a date by which you're going to have to get that in. It's a fairly lengthy document. Unfortunately, some people don't like it. They find it intrusive. They find it, troublesome. They're not happy with it. I understand that. There's no way around it. And there's no way to change it. You can't even change a question. The entire document is in statute. It's not a regulation. It's not a suggestion that was created by the commission to change it. There has to actually be a new law, an amendment signed into law by the governor. So it is what it is. And the questions are what they are. Generally speaking, they're going to ask for ranges when it comes to monetary information, not for exact amounts. So that, that may be a little less troubling for some people who have private businesses and are concerned about entering that kind of information. But it's necessary that you complete it. There is question by question guidance for completing it on the website for the commission. I'm happy to help you if you have questions with regard to it. But even though I've been doing this for years, I am not an expert in that form. People come up with financial issue questions that I sometimes can't answer. So the commission has been very good at responding to questions. They have an 800 number for people when they're filling this out, and they will either pick up or they will call you back. They have an email address that you can send something into, and they will clarify something for you if you have a question about how to fill it out. So again, you're welcome to contact me if you have an issue with regard to filling it out. But if something comes up and I can't help you, or if you just don't want to, you want to go straight to the source, you're welcome to go straight to the commission as well. There are penalties for not filing it, right? Financial penalties. So it's not something that can just be ignored. Eventually the commission will follow you and get to the point of saying, we've reached our limit. First, they'll send me an email. They'll send you an email. They'll send a couple more. They might put your name up on their website, but ultimately they can issue a notice. And after that, they can start issuing penalties, financial penalties. And those penalties, in theory, I've never seen it done, but there's a maximum of $10,000. So you don't want to mess around with it. And again, if you're having a problem or there's some issue, be sure you contact me as early as you can so we don't have any difficulty with it. So the ethics law itself, the whole key to the ethics law is that it wants to avoid conflicts that are real, conflicts that they just look real. Remember, the general public often has no idea what we're doing. They don't know what the public subsidy board is. They often don't know what particular agencies do in any kind of detail. And sometimes something which you know is fine and everybody within the agency knows is fine might look odd to somebody on the outside. So we always have to be mindful not only of the reality, but of the appearance of something so that we don't run into a problem because the commission will find something that appears to be a problem just as much a problem as something that really is a problem. Again, appearance and reality are the same to the commission when it comes to the ethics law. So you need to be careful with that. You can't use your position on the board to in any way, develop or achieve any type of personal gain. I mean, it seems simple and obvious, but it's clear that's what needs to be stated. That's what a conflict is. You're using your state position in some way personally to result in something that's good, a personal gain for you. The standards that the commission will apply for everybody under their code of ethics, which is Section 73 of the Public Officers Law, are that everybody should be impartial and independent when they're using their own judgment to make a decision on something. Now, I recognize that members of this board come from various sectors within the state. The statute was created to have that. So obviously you have resources behind you and organizations behind you, and you have to have their interests in mind. And it's not saying you can't do that, but it's saying that as you review whatever it is that comes before you, you do your best to be impartial and fair as you make a decision of some kind. That's all it's saying. Confidentiality, your decisions, if you look at the statute, a lot of your decisions or the decision-making process is deemed confidential. So there are some things that if they're deemed confidential, you're not allowed to reveal them. That means you can't tell people about them. You can't use that information in some way. You can't reveal it. So, Jill Archambault, the general counsel for the department, she can give you, a much more elaborate description of confidentiality and what is and what isn't with regard to your deliberations. But you just need to be mindful of the fact that you're not permitted to reveal confidential information, just like everybody within the agency. If you're familiar with the department, we have confidential information for individuals, for businesses, and everybody must be very careful about not revealing it. The unwarranted or undeserved privileges merely because of your position. Obviously, you're not going to try to do that. Financial conflicts. Again, I know you come from certain organizations, and depending upon the nature of what it is that's before you, I can only tell you that because there's an infinite number of possible scenarios, but maybe at some point something comes up where your personal involvement in the private sector is under review by the board. If it gets to that point, I need you to contact me so we can talk about whether or not it's appropriate for you to continue and render a decision on that issue, or whether in that particular case, you might want to recuse yourself from the board and not be a part of that particular decision. I don't expect it to happen often, but it's something that you need to be aware of because it could come up. And so it's very important for you to think about those types of things when matters come before you at the board. There are decisions by the various prior commissions on recusals, and whether or not they become an operational problem, that's for you to decide, the board. It's not my role to tell you what you have to do. I just need to make sure you're aware of things so that you can make a reasoned decision if the time ever arises. There are some issues with regard to what's called a reverse 2-year bar. If you're here, if you're working in the private sector, if you come to work for a state agency, for example, for some reason, there are rules about what you can do in terms of dealing with your prior private sector employer for a certain period of time, just like there are rules about what I can do if I leave and I can't appear before the Department of Labor for 2 years. So there are those types of things. Again, I'm not going to go into detail and give you a lot of different factors, but you just should be aware of them. Political activity is another factor that you need to be aware of. In the workplace, in the state workplace, it's just flat out not prohibited. So don't, is the simplest answer I can give you if you have a question about political activity in the workplace. I mean, I'm not sure the resources that you'll have, if you have access to state resources, Don't ever use state email, state internet, state computer, state phone, whatever it is, state resources that you might have access to. Simply don't use them for any political activity. Private sector, your state and US citizens, you're permitted to do anything that you've always been permitted to do with regard to political matters. You're not prohibited from anything, but you just need to be careful and keep your two lives separate when it comes to political activity. No, so in the workplace, no nominating positions, petitions, don't use state resources, don't email, no political communications, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, those are the kinds of things to be aware of. But really, all I want to leave you with is the fact that, these various things, just have them in the back of your mind. If something ever comes up where you think there's a potential problem, please contact me or contact the commission if for whatever reason you want to do that, and make sure you have a full understanding of whether there's an issue or not. And then you can make your decision as to how you want to proceed. Thank you.
Great. Any questions? In New York? Nope. Okay. Thank you, Jerome.
You're welcome.
So an important issue for this board to address upfront is our procedural process for how we will conduct our meetings. The open meetings law and the statute establishing the Public Subsidy Board are both silent on the creation of procedural rules or bylaws, meaning that there is no requirement to or prohibition against the board adopting either procedural rules or bylaws. We may adopt rules to govern our proceedings, provided that the rules are reasonable. Any proposed rules will need to take into consideration the authority of the board and open meetings law requirements that we just discussed. Additionally, any procedures or bylaws that are adopted will need to be adopted by a majority vote of the board in an open meeting. So for us, that means 7 members agreeing at a vote held in person. As a starting point, as the chair, I'd like to solicit your feedback about what procedures should be formally established. The mechanism for establishing those procedures, for example, a resolution outlining the procedures, the adoption of bylaws, et cetera. If there's an interest from members establishing written procedures, we can discuss the topics of interest now or in a future meeting. And we can solicit further discussion from members on specific topics, or we can present a written document for review consideration, however you want to do that. To kick off the discussion, here are a few procedural and process topics that as chair, I want us to consider. A procedure to allow members to join a meeting remotely from a non-public location if the member is experiencing an extraordinary circumstance pursuant to Public Officers Law 103A, and development of criteria for determining what constitutes an extraordinary circumstance. I'm going to read through a list of them and then we can go back and take them one by one if you want. A procedure or rule of conduct for public hearings pursuant to Labor Law 224C4. A process and procedure for the recording of meeting minutes. A process and procedure for the individuals or organizations to contact the board or make a request that the board review a specific project, and formally adopting an ethics code. As Labor Commissioner, I'm going to ask my staff to undertake this charge to make recommendations to this body. This is a collaborative board, so if there are any members who have anything to add, please feel free to do so at this time. Questions, ideas, and then we can charge the staff to come back with suggestions if that's okay with everybody. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
Gary LaBarber here in New York City.
Hi.
I would just, my recommendation would be, why don't you and your staff prepare something for us to review, and then we would be able to review it, and then perhaps we will like to edit it or add to it.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that works. I think I can probably circulate it in advance of the next meeting, but let me check and make
Yeah,
sure.
I think
Because it's
probably the
open
best
meeting.
bet. I mean, rather than us just trying to, rattle off things off the top of our head now at this meeting. If they prepare something that may be satisfactory to all the board members, or we may want, to augment it or add upon it.
Thank you, Gary. I would be
Thank
happy
you.
to do that.
Great.
If that's
Thank
all
you.
right with everyone.
Great.
Good. A final topic I want to address is our schedule. So I want to let the public know that beginning in 2023, this board will meet quarterly and on an as needed basis. So we know we'll have one meeting every quarter, but also obviously if there are circumstances that require us to meet more frequently, we can do that as well. does anybody have any reflections on this, the content of this meeting? Any questions? I know it's kind of a pro forma at this point because we need to have them come back with recommendations for all of our ways to proceed. But no.
Commissioner,
Yes.
one more point. So no, I think today's meeting is the appropriate meeting to kind of go over the outlines which you've done and your staff has done. Obviously, there's a lot of work to be done here. There are a lot of issues that we need to address in terms of definitions and what qualifies as construction, et cetera. I mean, there's a lot of open issues. So my only hope is after we have this preliminary meeting, the next meeting, we'll be able to begin those conversations.
Right. I look forward to doing that. And obviously, if there's any homework for all of you to do, you'll be getting that before the next meeting. So you won't be stuck, responding in the moment. But yes,
Right.
Gary's right. There's a lot of work ahead of us. And I personally thank each and every one of you for being on this very important board. Yes.
Commissioner, you know what may be really productive? I'm just thinking out loud again, and anyone else can jump in. Perhaps at the next board meeting, you may and your team may want to put together an agenda of what topics we'd like to address, right? So some of those open, I mean, we're certainly not going to be able to address them all in one meeting. So, we may want to start with some of the more the ones that I think are obvious out there, like the definition of construction, and talk about, what subsidies will trigger the 30%. I mean, it's pretty much in the law, but I think there's even questions on that. So maybe your staff could propose an agenda, or even, touch base with each of the board members and ask the board members, like, what topics would they like to address, at least initially, so that, we have a kind of an outline of the issues that we're going to be need to undertaking. So I just, just from a procedural point of view, that may be helpful.
It's very helpful. And I think, some of us are more conversant with public subsidy law and public works laws than others. And I want to make sure everybody's, reading off the same playbook, so we understand what we mean when we say those words. So we'll make sure that everybody gets that information as well. Well, I want to thank you all for being here today. I especially thank Stephen because he drove across the state from very snowy Buffalo, and I really appreciate it. Thank you. This is a really important service that you're doing here for your fellow New Yorkers, and I look forward to working with all of you more. The materials related to today's meeting include a recording of today's meeting, which will be posted on the Public Works section of the Department of Labor website. Any questions you have, of course, don't hesitate to get in touch with me, and we'll get back to you. But again, thank you all for taking the time out of your very busy schedules to be here. And I look forward to working with you. And have a very, very nice Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
too.
Same to you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.